Good morning guys, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Hannah if you're new here, and today I thought we'd make some dungarees. So I'm currently in the crimbo limbo period, but you'll be seeing this quite a bit after, because I fancied making some dungarees for my sister's birthday. I'd thought about getting her some of the Lucy and Yak ones, but they're quite expensive and didn't really come into a birthday budget, so we thought we'd make some. The pattern that I've gone for is this one from Tilly and the Buttons. Not a company I've used before, but the dungarees looked absolutely fine, just bog standard dungarees. So we'll give it a go. And then sizing wise, because I can't fit it to her, because obviously if it's a birthday present it's a surprise. Sizing wise, their sizes actually look like they match up to standard UK sizes. So a UK 8 is a 26-inch waist, which is about right for our UK sizing. So I thought I'd make it to a size 8. And the fabric I have got is this one, which I think it was from Dalston Mill, but I'll link down below, because you know when you've looked at so many fabrics and you can't quite remember which one you actually went for. But it's this really lovely blue colour. It's a corduroy, it's got a nice weight to it, not too heavy, but it's also got a little bit of stretch, which when I was thinking about, I think dungarees could be made without the stretch if you're going for something quite baggy, but because I've not got her to fit to at every stage, I thought something with a little bit of stretch would make it a lot easier and should make them a lot more comfortable to wear. So yeah, this is what we're going with. I've already cut out the pattern pieces to a size 8. I'm going to check the leg length, but the rest we're going standard with, and we're going to start cutting the fabric. I've not got tons of space anywhere to do the cutting out, so I'll try my best to cut it out up here on the floor. But I thought I'd show you the rough layout that we'll be using. So it'll be this one. It should all fit on the fabric. I've got about 2 meters of fabric there. I've ironed all the pattern pieces flat, and have decided not to change the leg measurement. I worked it out to be about a 31-inch inside leg, which is about standard, and she's quite short, so I think that'll be absolutely fine. So I'm going to get cutting and I'll join back with you once everything's cut and ready to go. Pieces are cut out now, and it says to start with the front bib part of the dungarees. So I've changed a little bit what we're going to do on this, because what they had is they had the front part and then they just had some facing going around the inside to neaten off these seams. Instead of doing that, because I had enough fabric, I've decided that I'll fully line the front bib section. I like to make these little tiny tweaks just to make sure the quality of the garment's what I want it to be. So we're going to start with that. We're going to sew, the bib is in 2 halves. So we're going to sew down the centre seam, right sides together. And then what it's asking is for you to iron the seam allowance down and then stitch down, holding it in place. So I'll show you that as I do it, and we'll start with that bit on both the outside and the lining. So here are the bibs that I've done. I had a few issues on the first one, which I'll show you the best that I can. I don't know how well it will come up on camera, but the second one, which will be the front, looks a lot better. So this is the first one that I did. I don't think you'll be able to see, but I tried to use a darker stitching thread for a little bit of a contrast. So we've got a stitching line down here and a stitching line down here. But my machine had a few issues with tension, and it just looked a little bit scruffy. So what I've done on the second one is hopefully I've sorted the tension issues out a little bit, but I think it's because of the pile of the fabric makes it quite difficult for the machine to gauge tension properly. But I've changed the thread to pretty much a matching colour to the fabric, so it's a lot more discreet and looks a lot smarter. So now that those are both done, I'm going to do right sides together and stitch them together. The bib has been lined now, so what I have done is I've ironed it flat and I've just pinned it so I can go around and top stitch it. As far as fabric's concerned, I honestly didn't think I'd have a single issue with this fabric and stitching it. I thought it would be absolutely fine, quite easy. It's got a little bit of stretch to it, but that's, I have to say, that doesn't cause massive issues. As far as the rest of it, because it's quite soft and it's got a pile, and I'm not used to sewing any sort of like velvets or anything, it moves quite a lot in the machine. It stretches a little bit in the machine. It's not terrible, and it frays, but it doesn't fray too much. But it's definitely throwing a few more challenges than I expected. But hopefully it will look really nice. Also, in a couple of places, I'll show you up close in a little bit. But it's gone a little bit bobbly and it maybe looks a little bit on the tattier side. I think that's just because it needs a wash. So I'm hoping that if I make the dungarees, give them a wash, iron them, that they'll look quite smart. But generally it's a lovely fabric, it's got a lovely feel to it. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to top stitch around this now and then we'll have a look at what's next. So the front is now done and we're going to do the patch pocket from the front of that. Let me show you the instructions. So instructions wise, it says to use one piece, sort of iron in the seam allowance and then attach it on. To make my life easier again and just to make it higher quality, because I've not got an overlocker at the moment to finish all the seams off, what I'm going to do is I've cut 2 of the pockets, so I'll do right sides together, turn it the right way out and then just attach that straight on top. And then it just means that no raw edges are there or can fray or anything like that. So we're going to right sides together that and then add it to the front, which is looking like that. The top stitching went really well actually. I was slightly worried about it moving too much or stretching out of place. But that's looking quite smart and it is a really lovely feeling fabric, so yeah, that's how we're looking. I can't remember whether I showed you this before I went for my lunch or not, but the pocket is attached. It's all looking pretty neat, pretty good. So we're going to move on to the next step now, which seems to be the straps and the back part. So I'm going to move on to those. It says fold each strap lengthways, right sides together, press on the fold, pin together along the raw edges and stitch. So that's what we're going to start with, and then there's some top stitching to do, and I think once the straps are done we attach it to the back and then the back gets made up, the right sides together, you end up with this. So a lot of this seems to be just repeating the same sort of steps like for different parts of the dungarees. So I've sort of skipped over a few bits, stitched the straps, top stitched the straps, and now I'm going to look at making up the back section and attaching them onto that. So here are my straps. I'd show you the top stitching, but because of the fabric it's really hard to see, but it all went very, very well. It's all looking really neat. And so the next part that I need to do is I need to just stitch them onto this piece, generally just to hold them in place, and then what we do is we go right sides together, the straps sandwiched between the 2 pieces, and we pop the second piece on top and stitch around here. I'm probably top stitching again. There's a lot of top stitching in these dungarees, but that's okay, we don't mind. Okay, so that is the back done and the bib done. They're both looking really, really good. I've just had a look at the instructions and realised that I'd missed a step with the back pockets. So I'm going back to do that now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to line it with a cotton fabric, just because I don't want these to be too heavy and to make the leg sag at all. So I'm going to use a cotton fabric. It won't be on show, but it's something just pretty and quirky if it does get seen. I'm going to line those pockets, attach them onto the legs. The pattern shows you where to attach the pockets, so that should all be fine. And then once that's done, we're going to have a look at the button tabs where it buttons up at the sides of both of the legs. I have attached the cotton onto the back of the pockets, and I'm about to attach them onto the trousers. As I say, as long as I do this well, the cotton on the inside shouldn't be visible on the outside. But it's of blue tone, so it doesn't really matter if it is, but it shouldn't be visible. I'm just going to top stitch really close to the edge on these, as neat as I can, and get those attached. And then we're going to have a look at the button tabs, which I'm yet to read on how I need to attach those. But it's basically those, attach the trousers, attach it all together. Hopefully we're nearly done. The next stage is the button tabs. So we've got 4 pieces of fabric here, all of the same size. On 2 of them we have half covered with interfacing. So it told you to cut 1 piece of interfacing, cut it in half and attach it to 2 of the button tabs. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to fold them all and iron them right sides together, and we're going to stitch just one of the short sides. So it says if you've got a direction to your fabric or a nap or anything, then you want to stitch the bottom edge, but otherwise stitch one of the sides, and then turn them all out the right way, and we'll look at the next step after that. Okay, so these are what the tabs look like with the bottom stitched and them ironed out. And then I have attached I have pinned the interfaced ones to the outside edge of the back of the trousers. So I've got 1 on each side. They're the interfaced ones. The uninterfaced ones I'm about to do exactly the same, but with the front of the trouser, making sure it's still the outside edge, and then I can stitch down all of those. So now that the button tabs are attached, it tells you to stitch from the hem to the bottom of the button tab on the outside of the legs, to attach the leg seam basically. If you have an overlocker, you could follow exactly what they say, which is to finish all your seams and then attach them right sides together and stitch. However, because I'm not using an overlocker for this, I am going to do more of like a run and fell style seam. So I've got wrong sides together at the moment. I'm going to stitch down with a 1.5cm seam allowance, and then trim one side, fold the long side over and stitch again. At this point in time I haven't yet filmed it, but I'm hoping that the video before this will have been more of like a tutorial on some of the different seams and stitching types. So if you're unsure of how to do a run and fell seam, or later on I'm going to use a French seam, if you want to know any of those things, then pop over to that video, and it will sort of run through a little bit more slowly and basically on how to achieve those stitches. Okay, so as I said, I'll have a video that will show you properly how to do this, which I'll pop a link to above, but I'll show you roughly what I'm doing now. So we have a cut down seam here and a longer seam there. So the longer seam gets folded over the cut down one and popped flat, and then I will stitch along this side to keep it in place. So I'll start pinning that now, pin it all down and then sew it in place, and that will be our outside seams. So I've just done the button tab on one of the legs and thought I'd show you what that looks like and how we'll get it on the other leg as well. Okay, so this is how the button tab looks. So the tab on the back stays outwards, and you basically just top stitch down to keep that nice and flat. And then the tab on the front of the leg gets folded back on itself and top stitched. So it basically strengthens this part of the front, and then I'll probably just stitch a little bit down here to keep them nice and attached and flat there. But that's how it's going to look. So as I've just explained there, this is the side that's still to do. So the first thing to do is iron that and top stitch down this side, nice and neatly down there for the back. And then the front, I am going to fold it back on itself and top stitch in a rectangle around the edges there, and then that should sit pretty flat like that. Good morning guys. I ran out of time and energy and daylight and all the things yesterday, so I thought I'd finish these off with you today, and we're going to start with the trouser construction. So we've got the outside leg seams already. We're going to do the inside leg seams and then the crotch seam. So again, because I am not using an overlocker on this project, I'm going to French seam the inside legs. I think the pattern just says to overlock it and then normal seam it, so if you're doing it that way then absolutely go ahead. But I'm going to French seam, and it's a matter of, here is one leg with the button tab on the outside. This is the outside seam going down the middle, and so I am going to attach both the legs. Let me get a hold of it because I'm just dropping things right now. Hang on a sec. So I am going to attach the leg down to the crotch. I'm going to do this on both legs, and then we attach the crotch as a second point and join both legs together. So I've just pinned the first leg. I'm going to zip down with wrong sides together, a very small seam allowance, probably about 0.5. And then that gets turned the other way out. The seam or the raw edge is getting cased into that seam, and then I'll zip down at a 1 centimetre seam allowance. It means that you keep your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, but you can do a fancy seam and get a nice concealed edge. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'll get back to you when I'm done. As I said before, go and check out my previous video for the tips on how to do the seams and a bit more of a slow rundown of exactly how they're constructed. I've just finished doing the French seam on the inside of the trousers and around the crotch. And so they're now looking like a pair of trousers. Looking really good, and really good quality on the inside by doing all these seams. So I think I have one raw edge that I'll sort out later from where the button tabs went on, but otherwise they're looking really smart. So next we're looking at attaching the waistband. I need to cut some interfacing for the waistband pieces, which is what I'll do next. And then I think we look at attaching the waistband onto the back piece and the front tab, and we see where we go from there. I've just interfaced one of each waistband. So I've got one of the back waistband interfaced, and then one normal, and one of the front waistband interfaced, and then one normal. So what it says to do next, hold that there, it says basically to tack or like loosely stitch to attach the waistband to the back bib and the front bib. So I'm going to do that on the machine. It says to match the notches and then attach that in place with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So that means that it will be invisible when we go to fully attach waistbands in the next step. I have attached the bib to the waistband first, and then what I'm doing now is I'm pinning the front of the trousers to the waistband here. It says that there should be excess fabric at the ends, which there is, so I'm going to stitch that in place, and I think I do similar with the back, but I'm going to check that before we go ahead. I have attached the waistbands currently. They need ironing, they need seams trimming down. That's sort of the next step that I've got to do. And then we'll line the waistband with the inside pieces. But I wanted to just pin it together and hang it up so we could see what we're looking like. They're currently looking really good. By eye, I'd say yes, they're looking true to size, but we'll find out more once I give them to her and see whether they fit or not. But yeah, they're looking really, really smart at the moment. So I'm going to read the instructions and have a look at what's next, sewing wise, but we're getting there. The next stage of the waistband is to sort the inner waistband out. And before attaching that to the actual garment, we're going to turn up the bottom hem by, it says 1/2 inch, so it's technically 12 millimeters, but just under 1.5. And we're going to turn that up and stitch it so that when we attach it, it can just get hand stitched along the bottom and conceal any raw edges. I'll show you as I go because that might not make a lot of sense. This is one of the waistband pieces, and I'm just going to go along and iron this hem in. So this is about 12 mil. I've got my tape measure here to check it, but that's about 12 mil, and I'm going to go along the bottom edge of this, which is sort of the outer curve, and do exactly the same on the other waistband piece, and then we'll look at attaching them. I'll show you best as I can as I'm doing it now. Let that focus. So I am pinning the inner waistband. I've sewn the bottom edge, and we're pinning the top to the waistband seam where it joins at the moment. So we're pinning that along there, and then when we sew it, that will get folded down and will cover the inners of the waistband. And we're going to do exactly the same with the back. I have pretty much finished waistbands now. They just need some hand stitching on the inside, which I'll do in a little bit. So I'm going to move on to the hems. It does say to do buttons and buttonholes next, but I'm unsure on whether I'm going to do the buttonholes on my machine, doing like the old-fashioned way with zigzag stitch, or whether I'm going to go to my mum's and use her machine. So I'll leave that for now. But yeah, so we're going to do the hems of the trousers. So this is the bottom of the trouser, and what I'm going to do is turn it up once at about 1.5 centimeters and then double it over and then stitch it. If you're making for yourself, or if you can try on the person that you are making for, absolutely try them on and hem them to length. I'm going to leave them quite long, and then I can always take things up. And if I don't trim any fabric out, if they need adjusting, I've got the fabric to adjust them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn it up once, turn it up twice, and then stitch on both legs. Okay, so it's a little bit later now. I've done some of the finishing off bits that I wanted to do, and I'll show you where I've got to. We're struggling with lighting a little bit at this point, but here are the dungarees, if it will focus. Here you go. So we've got the little dungaree hooks on, and I've just stitched the straps at the right length. I have popped some pretty little buttons which they hook onto here. I've hand stitched the inside of the waistband, so that's all looking finished off now. And obviously I hemmed the bottom of the trouser earlier, so that's all looking nice and neat. So the only thing left to do is buttons and buttonholes, which I'm thinking that I'll probably take round to my mum and dad's and do it on my mum's machine, as mine doesn't do a proper buttonhole. So I think that will just give it a nicer finish than what I can achieve at home. I'm sure I'll pop in some pictures and maybe some more clips after this, but since that's the bulk of the dungarees done, I wanted to sign off and say thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one, so bye! Hey guys, so I don't have any clips of Alex actually wearing dungarees, but I just wanted to pop on and say about how they fit and what I thought of the pattern. So I'll pop a couple of pictures up of sort of detailed pictures of like the finished garment. But the fit was perfect. I'd say it's very, very much true to size on the pattern. If anything, on the slightly smaller size, but she's a size 8 in clothing stores, and the size 8 fit her perfectly. So we're really, really happy, and they looked very, very smart on. As far as the pattern, I'd never used this pattern brand before, but they're very, very simple to follow, loads of pictures. Every instruction was quite easy to understand and know what they meant by it. There's lots of steps with it being dungarees. They're obviously quite a big garment. There's a lot to sort of construct, but there was nothing technical, or nothing technical that they didn't explain and show very, very clearly in pictures. So a really, really good make. If you're going to try making some of these, then enjoy. I had great fun making them, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!